principles haven't gone away. They're still there. And we're here as a group to help collectively share those principles and figure out how do we navigate this absolute craziness that's going on. That's incredibly exciting. So, that's it.
Hey. And we've had some events on this topic. AI is everywhere. So this whole week, and there was AI week before. Everyone's been talking about AI, but one thing that we felt that's kind of missing in all these discussions is, hey, how can we improve AI? How can we build that loop where AI can improve itself? How can you use AI to make AI better? And it's not basically about training LLMs or doing a better job at making Anthropic better or God better. It's not that, but it's as an organization, as us practitioners, how do we make the foundation, data foundation, the strategy, the governance, the whole aspect, the whole 9 yards to make AI work for us in the right way. And again, obviously, with all our experiences, collective experiences, I think we'll all learn more and more and figure out the best way of moving further. At the end of it, if all of us can learn a little bit more about how to use AI in our daily lives, as personally or professionally, I think that'll be our best outcome. So thank you all for coming, and we can get started then.
Yeah, I guess, and also, if you want to talk,
Yeah.
the first time, just please, quick introduction on you.
Yeah.
Part of what we want to do is also give everybody a mechanism to help build their brand, right? So an event like this, we're going to try to take pictures. We'll get you the pictures and you can post something, right? Little things like that. That's just as important as sharing within our group, is the ability to share the thoughts, make them your own, and build your brand out there. I think we all recognize how important that is these days. So it's very important that, just a little background, why you're here. If you don't want to talk, that's okay too, right? We don't want to push anyone. But with that, I'll open it up with the first area, the first topic. If you had to put a definition on what AI provides, what would it be? It could be anything. I have 3 categories in mind. But what do you guys see AI gives us? Anyone want to start?
Automation.
Okay.
Productivity.
Productivity, okay. Anyone?
The future.
What's that?
The future.
Future.
Future. That's philosophical.
Yeah. Or let's pivot a little bit. How does it do those things?
Yeah.
How does it offer automation? How does it offer getting us future? How does it make us more productive?
It's a bit more like, because there's always been ways to automate things that have described it perfectly and had an autonomous, or like a deterministic system for them. This is very much it's almost the easiest form of automation that we have. Or even arguably, maybe the most expensive too.
Yes.
And in the long run versus the short run.
Well, it's definitely the most accessible.
Yes.
Easy, maybe a perception,
Sure.
right? Because it may give us false confidence, right? But that's okay. We need confidence.
Mm-hmm.
Context. Does it provide us context on the things we pointed to? Documents, code, and how important is that?
So when I was in the outsourcing business, the line I coined was dual phase processing. Right? So when you outsource any function, you follow certain rules. Based on the rules, you train a call center employee or a data worker to process that invoice on certain rules. So everything is rules based. So for my understanding of AI is that you've got to teach it the rules. Right? It's a blank slate, and you can take that, you can take Claude or any application. You have to teach it the rules and give it context of how it will perform based on the rules. And once it's done that enough times, it can then learn to be more subjective as opposed to being specific. So earlier, when you were doing rule-based processing, you were either in or out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Deterministic.
So it was in or out. There was no software was not deciding whether you were kind of in
Mhm.
or whether you should be in, or whether your credit score was enough or not enough. It was either yes or no, then it would go to the boss or go to somebody higher up who then determine based on other factors of whether you own your house. If you own your house but the credit score is shit, they might still give you the credit card, right? But that software wasn't doing that. So, but hopefully with AI you are learning to do that, because that person through a large enough model will learn that if you have your own house which is debt free, then you're definitely you have assets.
Yeah, so basically
That's
on
the-
context-based decision making, it's
Yeah.
less about 0 or 1, electricity always on or off. It's more about can it have any other state in between, so that using data to make decisions, but with more humanistic sense, and having the machines do it for you. Is that?
I mean, that's my understanding, but half the time, from what I'm reading, half of them, I've got Claude gets hiccups, goes to sleep, it doesn't give wrong answers. So it's not that it's perfect either.
No, none of it
It's
is.
far from perfect.
And if it was, we wouldn't be here talking.
Yeah.
We'd probably be at home trying to figure out where our jobs are.
Yeah.
So that's the opportunity.
So I take a different approach. People are like, we talked about so many features of the AI. For me, AI is basically, finally I have someone companion who I can delegate my work. Like, it's as simple as that. Like if I want someone to summarize the document, look at my email, send me a reminder, set up my calendar, write my code, my automation, the framework, figure out, right? So I can be more productive. So at $100 or $200 a month, I'm buying some subscription. I am able to delegate my work without having other employees. Right? That is one of the biggest advantage of AI for me as of now. Right? So I have my own startup. So if going back 3-4 years, if I have to run a startup, at least you need 5 to 6 people to figure it out, right? But now you really don't need it. You just need a fractional CTO, right? Think about like how I was able to. So basically, that's what I'm saying. It is making you more efficient if you can really plan.
Someone had a question?
Yeah, on the context basically, and so I have this debate, let's say, in my mind. One of the, let's say, a simple use case, right? So one of the things I did recently was basically having co-work, going through 3 different platforms, pulling data from all of them, and then putting up a report, and then scheduling it to do that every week, right? So we have the weekly reporting for a project. And I know how important context is, and I know how you need to basically outline everything and give the guidelines in order to make sure that it's the best outcome. Although I had this debate that on the one hand, yes, I will give it all the context I can. On the other hand, let's say on the final product and the report outline, shouldn't it be able, based on all the data and the background and everything that Anthropic has at this point, be able to determine what the best outcome will be, right? Because I might point you to one direction, but there might be something else that I didn't even think about, right? So I'm constantly basically balancing between, do I want to give it all the context and make sure it's the best one, or I might be missing some, so I want it to
You don't want
drive
to be
there.
prescriptive.
Yeah.
Overly prescriptive.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, and
So where's the balance? That's the question.
it's the balance. And there's no answer to it, except to recognize there has to be a balance.
Yeah.
Right? And the other thing is, that's no different than how we always worked. Whether we were talking to a BA talking to an engineer, or a BA talking to a user, you had to strike the balance of providing enough context to allow independent and creative thoughts that went outside of your little world, right? You couldn't just let them go at it, because then they didn't have your context to ground it. That doesn't change. And that's the beauty. That's why none of what we're doing is seismically changing what we're doing. It's seismically changing how we're doing it. Of course, we have a companion. So I just want to make one quick summarizing document, summarizing emails. That's using AI to generate context because it's contextualizing. Using that context to pump into an agentic AI because it needs context is the perfect example of the virtuous cycle. How do we use AI to accelerate the better use of AI? Right? And we'll talk about it in the data governance aspect.
Yeah, so basically, no, I'm sorry.
No, I'm done. What is it?
Yeah, I think the reason that you all and we all feel that we have a companion now, that we are almost like a one-man army, able to accomplish so much more, is basically because now we found a machine is able to synthesize the information we are getting. We are giving it documents to documents. That's why it's able to code by itself, because it knows how to capture all that information. If you give all that information to an individual, they'll be crapping up. They'll be like, I'm done. Thank you. I'll meet you on Monday. But with AI, I think all of us have found that possibility of just giving it enough. But that goes the other way also. Like we probably sometimes give it just too much, and then it's hallucinating, and then we start talking about guardrails and all. And that's where the applicability of using AI to figure out, hey, is this the right path? Is this the right governance? Is this information in logs going in the right direction or not? That's the next level of AI. How do we use AI to basically make it better?
So how many of you subscribe to the agile methodologies? Doesn't mean the rituals,
Yeah.
the methodologies and mindsets, right? That's the difference between big A and little a. Big A is you have to have the stand up and with the double thing. People just do it for the sake of doing it. Little A is that mindset. Can any of you give me what you think one of the top principles of agile mindset is? Any voice?
Feedback.
Feedback. Shorten the feedback.
Yes.
Awesome. And how did we used to do that 5 years ago? The VA would talk to the business. They would go off and write the specifications, hand them back to the business. Business would say, yeah, that sounds okay. Hand it back to the engineer to develop it. Developer would do it just like it was written. The BA would say, yeah, that's just how it wrote it. We'd give it back to the business and they'd say, no, that's not what I want. That was a long feedback loop. Even with Agile, that was a long feedback loop, let alone what. But what if we can use, so we talked about generating context. AI can generate code, right? You all know that, we talked about that. Does it extremely well when if you're an adult and you understand, right? Now you could take what someone says, generate it real quick, and give it back to them. That's a much shorter feedback. Again, using AI to generate code to produce and validate the shared understanding of the requirement and then the shared understanding if that requirement was met. That's the feedback. That's very practical. That's very powerful, very pragmatic. That's the opportunity we have now. And that's not even getting into this really cool agentic AI. This is just solving these pain points we've had for decades throughout our career. Can you thoughts on that?
No, that's bang on target. Basically, it all comes down to the same thing, that because AI is so good at understanding your, like, remember 3 years ago when ChatGPT just came along, where we were like, I'm telling you to create a poem and it's bringing it out. So it was so much novelty. The novelty is gone, but now the real applications are, you are able to get something out of a machine so quickly. And that's where, the whole world changed, good way or bad way, we don't all discuss.
How many product owners, BAs do we have? Any of them? Even if you just perform that function because you had to, right? How have you seen your approach change with AI?
I mean, I think a big part is always like briefing in context windows, like being able. I think one of the biggest gains that I see from AI are in the smallest places. So, like for example, like note taking, even like it used to be so unbalanced. Like being the conversationist while also taking notes, whereas now like you can just turn on voice recorder, let it go, just have a conversation as if you're face to face, have it be more natural, be able to actually pull out the questions that you need, rather than trying to keep up with the just flow of conversation and working backwards. And from there, you can actually just create and move straight from the initial conversation. It's going to be a lot more long because it's not like, okay, I think I wrote this, or I was thinking of this at that time. It's going to create off of the actual context of what the conversation is. So once you have that brief, not only is it more effective in quoting back the client, so that way they can see that you're actually listening to them. You're then far more efficient in delivering the insight to the team, where it's like, okay, to fulfill this, we need this, but the exact thing that the client asked for was this. They don't understand the nuances of what specific clients are looking for, because even if you're looking to do the same product, there's going to be certain like micro feature sets that one client will want more than the other. And like the biggest gains in AI right now, I don't think it's just like throwing that wall. We're getting rid of half our C-suite. It's all going to be a template. It's how can we make marginal gains to make ourselves better? But for 98% that I'm wasting my time on to deliver the 2% change. And like even with businesses I do work with, they don't want to fire their teams right now. They want to expand their business and give their teams the capacity to grow with it. And what's interesting is to speak to executives who don't have the perspective of we're hiring everyone for this. It's, hey, my entire team's working minimum 60 hours a week and I want them down to 40. And growing your clients at the same time. And then I speak with the power users, people that are using the platform to understand what their use cases look like. And I see them sweating buckets and like, and it's like, I'm not here to replace you, I'm not here to grow you because you still have insight and knowledge. And ultimately, the only times that I found successful adoption of it is when the takeaway isn't, these are the things that you're doing that are being replaced. It's asking them, all right, so this is going on. It's like, what's the strategic perspective that you're going to add to this? And then they start seeing, now I'm not sifting through spreadsheets. I have a tool to do that for me, and I can just spend my entire time going to whoever I work with and deliver results.
That's an incredibly refreshing message. We don't get much. Ben, do you have anything you want to add on product?
I could have comments on this, but AI is going to go right? You know, when you have people who can utilize AI for certain insights or visibility to your own data, then you can make big decisions that make you need a lot of much higher level. Right? So this is
Excellent, thank you.
And this is taking that to the next dimension, right? So this is multi-dimensional. It's the note taking, is taking that as an example, which has been a lifesaver for us, right? But it can also be a problem because 3 days ago I was in a meeting, we did not turn the note taker on, and no one was taking notes. And today, after I mean, or maybe we were having too many meetings and that no one remembers about the meeting. So, but taking the other dimension is, now we have transcription and note taking has become so much more efficient. It will give you action items, next steps and all of that. Now let's say at the same time you're working with a client on a change order, SOW or a new feature. You have an existing thread. You just add a new context from this conversation into the SOW chat that you are having. Now what happens? This becomes the second dimension of your efficiency gain. Right? This is amazing in aspect of all of us can easily relate to today as human beings, that because we have all, I think we are all at that age where we have done these things manually and eventually maybe 10 years down the line people are like, why did you ever do it manually? They won't understand. So that's the whole idea of how we can use AI in the system level, I think that's the next topic where we wanted to talk about this piece, or we jump in ahead.
No. But, yeah, actually, one more thing on the development website. How many of you guys are engineers? Right? How many of you are? How many of you have strived for living documentation? Oh, I should say, how many wrote a piece of documentation that was deprecated 2 hours after it was right? I think because it's the same group. All right, so generating code, you can now ask questions about the code on Wednesday. You can produce various levels of documentation, multiple perspectives. Whoever, it could be a junior engineer, it could be an engineer whose English is their second language. It could be up to the CTO who wants to know where, how this is architected, whether the cloud resources. You can convert that into how do you tie this to cost of a project. So you can now decide on prioritizations based off of reusability. Of course, you now can ask the code which of the components are being reused. I think we're very close to living documentation. Has anyone used that aspect of it? Well, just using AI to document the code and get clean insights.
Part of the development cycle, right, is hard to use the system, right? When you're shaping requirements for it, right? So a lot of it is trying to understand what is the gap between where the system is right now and where it needs to be for you to use some of the functionality of the cloud, right? That's when we can understand, right? And those are the first things that we can never to ask it to implement something and make decisions, but I would go back and forth with it and try to understand the functions that are made first.
No, it does.
Yeah.
No, it does. All right. So, generating code, generating context, generating insight that you can go back and forth, all for the purposes of getting to intelligence. Right now, we want to own that intelligence. Right? It's what makes us grow, and they're not ready for that. But no, that's dead on, and you can start to see how that virtuous cycle of using AI to eventually build AI. To your point, the biggest changes occur in small pieces. If it was one big or two big things, there would be nothing to talk about. But that's, the marginal improvements. And thoughts on that?
Yeah, so, my past life I was a project manager. It's kind of ingrained into my mind. We have stand-ups in our organization still, but in the past I used to be going into Jira, typing in, okay, what's it talking about? And as Louis was saying, the moment we were out of the room, it was all already obsolete. How do we change that? Now, everything is like going on and recorded, and we have systems where we can input the output of the meetings to make that thing living. So anytime, anywhere, I open my app, I have the status of what development. That's the whole applicability of AI, I think, which has actually saved me multiple hours a day. I think I can manage 5 extra projects. It's not that I do now, but yeah.
Anyone else want to share any thoughts on that area before we move on? Okay. Data comes. How important is data to a life saving? Probably one of the most important things, right? Garbage in, garbage out to a scale that you've never experienced before. How many of you have built data analytics, business intelligence? Right? Data cataloging, is that important? Is that part of it? Important but unachievable?
It was necessary evil, but just
Yeah.
that, no one further. It's too difficult.
Lineage, right? optimal pipelining, right, DAG or whatever type of sequential asynchronous. Very hard to scale, right? And data quality. How many rules did you write on Monday that you had to write another 10 on Tuesday? Right, it just never ended, right? So think about how AI can help you. Keeping the cost aside, because when you're talking about data quality and the amount of data that you have to come through, I'll give you a quick anecdote. When I was trying to understand how to use AI in the context of regression and machine learning, I took a machine learning course online, and then I got tired of writing code, and I just said, well, if I pump the inputs into ChatGPT, would I get these same outputs? And I did. And then I asked ChatGPT, why wouldn't I do this instead of writing code? And to its credit, said it's a black box, it's going to cost you, you're not going to know how to maintain it. And then I realized, oh, I can use ChatGPT to generate the machine learning quality code and run it deterministically. But think about if you had a suite of spreadsheets, CSV files, right, that we were all adjusting, or you had Swagger documents now with a product. The catalog that you can build from that, if you pump that through an network, business context, hierarchies, determining when you can run dimensions in parallel and facts later if you want an ETL, or when we can get ELT. If you did it across 15 systems like you have to do in Zapping, or you're doing a much intelligent way now, what you used to do, how quickly you can get that lineage. And guess what? That's the context. Again, going back to the virtuous cycle. The catalog is what the LLM needs to go from text to SQL. Because it needs that context. Again, keeping the cost aside, of course, you got to now balance. If I give it a full data catalog, then I just use all my tokens before I answer the question. Again, that's where the adults come in. You figure out how to do it. But that was the first thing I realized when I picked this one was how do I go back and answer the questions I had 15 years ago when I quit data engineering because I couldn't do anything on premise. Snowflake came along and then it was just banging up the budget, right? Because everyone would high five about the query ran, we got it right, and then you got the bill the next day of how much it costs to do it. And I realized, again, I grounded it in my pain. And that's the value of AI. It could help you through the pain if you understand and are very honest about that pain. And after doing it for decades, you become honest. This is real. And now you have a tool. Now, going back to the virtuous cycle. So you have your catalog. You have the semantic model. Anyone build out semantic layers now? Or the understanding of importance of it, right? Again, it gives it that, grounds the context, it reduces the abstraction, it abstracts the complexity of a data model, which engineers build and make them overly complex. We try to normalize. So you have all that, and then you build your dashboards, right? And your user has another requirement. So you ask them, all right, let me document what you want for your dashboard, what's your requirement? And you know what the requirement is? I have a question. I have a question about my data. I just don't know what that question is going to be in any day, in any hour, in any meeting. But I have it. So now the virtuous cycle, where you're able to, that's okay, you're able to build dashboards quicker with the context, with the semantic model, with the lineage. You can now offer a generative AI aspect to it. And that would get the last mile. That last piece that you don't have to write 15 more dashboards that nobody would look at, right? And that, again, this is the practical aspect of what it is our group is about. Is how do you take this complex stuff and ground it so you can make marginal improvements that are real improvements, right? Any other thoughts on data governance?
Yeah, like you're making your own tech factor, right? So I think it's really important for you to figure out like what's your data about, where it's coming from, the right copyright issues are not present at the end of the day. Do you think you can use AI now to actually manage that aspect of governance around the data lineage, copyrights, publishing rights, and all that?
So right now it is still not autonomous. Like you cannot really figure out on the speed then what type of things to look for, what type of metadata to use, let's say, especially let's say when we get the course material from the publisher, let's say one publisher, and or let's say it's associated to one university, and that should not leak on the student from the university. And building the guardrails, data guardrails is very deep. And within the university ecosystem also, right, we need to make sure that the key information, let's say it could be personal information of the professor or anything. So as part of our platform, we also process the video lectures on classroom. So a lecture, we will be taking a classroom lecture about, let's say, how the inflation affects the economy, let's say. So he may be there and he may be taking something, drawing something on the board, right? So for us, when we capture the images, the person has to be out from there because it could be, that's one of the requirements obviously, right? So, and doing all those things, AI cannot really figure it out unless we have to specifically tell what type of like reaction we have to do out of the data. So, it's still a challenge, I would say, especially making sure that AI doesn't leak the data, like leak the important data to the users.
Right.
So from that perspective, yes, we still have that.
And business rules basically are governing in your case. But when the technology is able to redact the information, will there be a point in time where you will be able to go back and see that if that indeed happened? You know, that's the whole governance about, right?
Yes, yes.
And AI, I mean, this can be maybe a technology problem at this time, but in cases where it's not video and it's text, because that's something we all understand. If someone's notes from the market board from University A should not make it to University B, if we can take that data, OCR it, and put that into that University A's own database, can we put AI on top of it to make sure that this does not leak out?
Yes. So I'll give you one example, right? So in some places, in university school, professor take handwritten notes, and you write the notes. And when doing some other work, you could also have habit of writing your phone number or some other information that may not be related to lecture on the page. Right? It could be someone may be calling and you may note down on the same page information, or it could be something else, some birthday you can put there, right? So you got to clean up that, right? Because that should not, when a student asks a question, hey, I missed my my class, can you teach me what we discussed in the class, right? Now, because we have this transcript from the professor and the lecturer, we combine everything, we do a lot of stuff we can see. And we cannot tell him, okay, yes, professor was talking about this particular thing, also this is the phone number, right? We cannot say. So we need to check that.
That's a great. I mean, I would have not never thought those challenges in EdTech, but that's a great example. In this case, you are using AI using transcript again, note taking and transcript to validate what you can reveal and what you can't. That's the whole idea of where all can we implement the same principle. It's all about principle, right? That's all what we begin. Where all can we implement the same principles to have a continuous monitoring using AI on logs. Let's say this data breach. Right? There are signals somewhere or the other whenever that is happening. We tend to find this out 3 months down the line that an organization's data was breached. But if there is continuous monitoring using AI and it's always on checking, probably that governance possibly can be better. And again, it's non-deterministic, it's probabilistic, but that's the whole point, that we all want to not figure out, but discussing how can we use AI to make end results of AI systems better.
Yeah, think about, again, I mentioned it earlier when we started, the brute force, broad stroke approach that often cybersecurity, risk management, anyone in governance has, right? And it ends up being suppressed for the right reasons, right? Because no one wants to release this stuff. But when you can leverage AI to be surgical, because of its contextualization capabilities, you now are opening it to us to innovate. You're giving more power to the right people. That's the virtuous cycle. Using AI to better govern so that you can innovate better with AI. And I still think that. Anyone hear about that MIT 5% ROI on projects? So they published it last fall. They said 95% of the projects aren't getting ROI. And I think it's because they're trying to get to the end point with AI. If they started with the infrastructure, with the governance, with the software development lifecycle optimizations, making those small steps, and were smart enough to associate those steps with an end business value, they could have flipped that statistic on its head. Right?
Because the big thing, like what shocks a lot of our clients even when we work with them, they expect is just like, okay, here's AI, like they get the first deliverable as the product, whereas we won't work with the client unless we are able to, one, have a ground like phase zero, gather every single item that they've already done, every initiative, work with every executive to understand the gaps, and then from there build the phase one up. It's always going to be building enablement, being able to connect all of these that we need to actually build meaningful infrastructure versus just delivering an initial product, because now even new, unique challenge we face is when people come to us and they're like, hey, you can just build on top of what we already have. And it's like, oh great, let's check it out. And then it's something we built in quad code in 20 minutes. And it is so broken that if you even try to touch it, it would take longer than just starting from ground zero. I think a lot of people, and when we've been discussing, they think it's a race to the end. Whereas it's, yeah, all of the projects that we see meaningful ROI on are what's the core pain point you're seeing, what is the most marginal difference you can make that will support whatever is facing that pain point, so that it just becomes, maybe a spin instead, or even completely address.
Yeah.
It's never about, here's a pain point, what if we had Claude completely eliminate that element of the business because they can just do it for you? But that's selling snake oil.
It really is. And Ben and I talked about it. Think about when you're doing that, even if you're pointing it to the governance aspect or strengthening your infrastructure, you're understanding the nuance of these LLMs. And there are plenty of nuances in them, and they seem to change our way. Right? But think about the skill that 3 years from now, I should say the talent, because we're developing new talents. The skills we can ChatGPT and put online on YouTube, but the talent of how do we optimize those prompts? When do we point it to an LLM? When don't we? When do we make it deterministic versus probabilistic? Those are talents you just simply can't learn by reading. You have to feel the pain when you don't get that right. And think about how much more advanced you would be in 3 years while getting return on investment on those marginalized differentiators. Again, that's the opportunity for us to think more clearly about this. We don't get caught up in it and start drinking that Kool-Aid and the snake oil. We see this as a way of solving problems using principles that we always do. They don't go away. All right, so you want to give a little highlight.
Yeah. So one of the things that really all the witnessing is I think someone talked about it. barrier of entry. One thing that AI has really done for all of us is that because of our barrier of entry has gone so low that we are all able to think that we can start a startup, and many of us do. Now, when you take the same scenario into enterprises, they are able to now generate lots and lots of pilots or get an automation engineer from consultant from outside, and given a use case, they're able to produce great pilots. Now, what we have seen in the industry is that 74% of those pilots never reach production. There's a huge pilot production gap. And that implementation gap, that bridge, is probably what all of us are trying to resolve here. Because I think all of us have started our pet projects but never reached into it, just because we thought it was easy. How about now, while we can talk about the technology aspect, like why does a pilot reach production? How about us first validate with AI? What will it take for us to actually materialize something that we started to go into production? Have you ever tried asking AI for, not just for me as an assistant, but as a tutor, that hey, can you guide me, if like be a coach, and can you tell me if this, in order for me to reach my prototype stage and move it to production, what's it going to take? Has anyone thought about that aspect of AI usage? Because we are all using AI to help us, right?
Does anyone have thoughts on why there's such a storm going from pilot to production? Has anyone experienced and thought, what if we did this differently?
I want other people to talk before I
Yeah.
What? Handing it over to you.
Okay. So we are like I know. So we started our development sometime in September last year, and by April actually we are leaving. And it took us we did the scoping, like basically tested and we went live. So as part of that process, we're trying to really figure out, okay, actually we have written frameworks because we didn't really be in the air, right? And but we set the guardrails and frameworks and this is the rules we have to follow. The modularity and test-driven development approach, and we have written all those things, but we weren't sure what happens once it is deployed. And we still have that 2 AM problem that everybody talks about. Can you fix it if it breaks at 2 AM? Right? Let's say 2 AM is broke and Claude is not available, ChatGPT is not available. Can you fix it? And that actually brought us to think back, take a step back, and really figure out what are the pain points, the failure points. And then again, we use the AI actually. So we use the basically like 2 or 3 systems, like we use the Pen and as well as Gemini and Codix and Claude, 4 systems. We did a simulation which basically communicated with our 4 brains to really figure out these questions. So we did an experiment basically to figure out every time we run this experiment, at least we found a vulnerability. Right? So systems start getting better after almost like 6 or 7 attempts, but it took almost 2 to 3 months effort for us, right? To have that idea of coming together and what aspect, security aspect, right? Especially to figure out, okay, is there any data leakage, okay, is there the response times are quicker for the users, right? So we started documenting each of the metrics that we want to measure and figure out whether, okay, production will fail, will success. It's a actually, unless you have the engineering background and system architecture background, as of course these are all the tools as you said, right? But we need to know how to use them to make our system better. So, and now I can say yes. Now I believe in them because it made my system better.
How many job functions did it take to pull that?
When you say job function,
Engineering, cybersecurity,
yeah.
FinOps.
So so our focus, so what we did is that we started from the user perspective, what all the functions user will actually do, right? Either authenticated or user or anonymous user, where they can get into the system, right? So that is how we tracked our track and started filling all the functions. So,
So you anchored it in the use case. Right, that's one. But you talked about data leakage. Who defined the data leakage metric?
so what we, okay, so that's the guardrails, right? So
Yes.
especially because we have multi-tenant system, right? So one tenant to another tenant. So what we did is we tried to give some kind of mostly we use Superbase for some of our activity, and we also use Aurora from the AWS or from our database. So we try to change remove some of the constraints on the databases to test it out. What happens if you remove the constraints on the database? Will actually AI go and find out, yes, because you miss this database modeling constraint, will your data will leak whether it will tell or not. So we tested that and we actually found out that yes, because your data modeling is wrong, so your data will go to the other person.
So I guess I'm asking, who defined the data modeling? Was it a DBA?
Yeah, so you could say that. So
In the past,
That's the function,
Yeah.
right? And data leakage is a cybersecurity.
So initially we came up with because we have an idea, so we came up with our own data model, how it should look like, the base data model, and then we defined it using AI.
Exactly.
So when we defined it using AI, it identified the gap that we need to fill before we go into.
When you say we and our, is that a bunch of engineers?
Yeah, we are like 6 members.
All engineers with competencies in the different functions?
Yes.
That's the important one. The multidimensional competencies. Whether you can achieve it through a well-trained suite of engineers or through those competencies. And you have to do it in such a
Yeah, if you don't have the competence, that's a challenge, right? Because you don't know where to start.
Yeah.
Because the expertise, let's say if you bring a DBA or if you bring a system engineer, if you bring a security specialist, right? At least they will define a baseline
Yes.
for your product.
That's the
That is very important.
Exactly, and that's the gap basically, that if you did not have AI to validate, everything, is again it's two-way street. One thing is, if AI was not there, you would need all these functions maybe twice the resources that you currently have. Second bit of it is, if you did not have that expertise to ask the right questions to AI, you would not get to the point where you are. And that again is another this feedback loop, this virtuous cycle that we talked about. A virtuous cycle where we are feeding on each other to make systems better. And the purpose is, how can we do that? Or maybe you in your areas, and all of you probably in your areas have used AI to make what you're doing better. Not just removing one aspect of your role, but making that particular aspect that you have now used AI for, make that better. Make the monitoring better. Make the data modeling far superior. That's the whole intent. And that's a great example. Thank you for sharing that.
And the cultural aspect of doing that multi-perspective effort right out of the gate. No longer is it, let me engineer something for 3 months and then handle security. And then them shut you down. Or, you know, I heard this from about a large bank. They got this pilot, everyone's excited, they roll it out, 200,000 in tokens on the first one. Well, probably not a lot for a bank, but 200,000 tokens. And you gotta wonder, no one in FinOps was part of the pilot. They don't need the script. They just go to the engineer who asked the prompt, his questions, her questions, and it produces the FinOps scripts. Multi-dimensional, and that's the cultural aspect that is not spoken about as much. And it should have always been there. Right? It started with the cloud when you had the engineers thinking, I can just drag and drop this VM, I can set up this subnet, this VNet, completely ignoring 50 years of networking and security principles, right? Bring them all together. And now you have to bring the business in, you have to bring legal, you have to bring all these things in. When I first started this at Guggenheim, all these market data providers started to label a new module AI driven, not realizing the alarms it set off in legal and compliance of their customers. Right? They thought it was, oh, let's brand this thing. And almost every legal and compliance went over to business said, you got to shut it down now. So what they do, they sent out these addendums to the contracts about data destruction. We're not going to train on their data. But if you send us out data, we can't guarantee it. But if you use RAG, we can, because the data is not, it's just being referenced through vectors and embeddings. There wasn't anyone in the legal and compliance understood what RAG was, but an engineer could. And now think about the microcosm that represents. Multi-dimensional perspectives at the point of reviewing contracts. Not signing the contract and telling the engineer we just bought it, so now you have to integrate. That really resonated with me, of how important to bring. I'm sure those conversations were happening in September and October, not in May. I should say not in March, right? They were happening early. That's a cultural aspect. You enhance it with AI, but that's a shift that has little to do with AI, except it's going to really expose the gap where you can.
And even today, you know, we meet with businesses who would have a couple of meetings, go further down, and then somewhere in the organization, someone will raise their hand. Hey, I can do it. See, I put something in Claude, and I'm able to generate this. See, you don't need these people. And the leadership will buy it, because now they have a working pilot within 5 minutes. And we would have shown the same pilot to them, but with much more better harnessing and its own strength and capability. But they saw they don't people doing it. They were trying in their head was, this guy knows AI, so he can do everything. Now there's a pilot. 6 months down the line, it's still a pilot. and we are like, I mean, we don't want to say that. We told you so. And that's the whole point of view that lots of people are getting that we can do, because Claude can do it, we can do it. Claude is not going to come at 2 a.m. at night and tell you, you know what, I screwed up on day 3 of your coding and I gave you the wrong piece of information, so I'm fixing it.
It'll agree with you, it's good.
Yeah.
Right?
It would.
It'll just casually tell you, yeah.
Yes,
Now that you
right.
mention that, but another point. So we are a little past time.
Yes.
Does anyone have any topics, comments? Again, this is for all of us that you would want to just share. We can go back and forth. You could just toss it out. Anything?
I have a question. So looking at what these models are capable of, exploring and testing to see what they're good at and what they're not good at and whatnot. And I have a question, probably for everyone here. If you could, what would you provide from your own capabilities to the model that you'd be comfortable with to allow it to have that extra level of capability? And how far would you be willing to keep going? If it was possible. I'm just curious.
Any Anyone have thoughts on it?
It's a good question.
One thing I noticed from my experience, right?
Yes.
So any model, like, let's say, so like how it works in a boundary, right?
Sure.
Let's say there is a game and you have 4 players to play, right? So you give the scenario to, you are solving a problem and there are 4 players in the game. And so what LLM will do is basically, so it will only try to solve the problem within that context, right? It can never think that, okay, let me bring another player.
Does it bring up players?
Bring out, let's add another player, so
Yes,
finish the
that
game.
additional, the third question.
That
Yeah.
one will never bring that unless you tell it, right?
Yes.
So that intelligence is with us always. We will never give it to the LLM.
Why not?
Otherwise, so it becomes autonomous. Right? That's basically it makes a decision for itself. Okay? And that extra intelligence is what we can figure it out, because in my perspective, AI is what it's already happened, right? So humans can foresee what can happen in the future, right?
Of course, yes.
So that knowledge we cannot give it to LLM, because LLM is one day behind always, right? So your brain is basically thinking about tomorrow, but LLM is working on yesterday's data. So
Yes,
I don't think
that's right.
there's a gap. So
If you're capable of filling it with today's data, which is what you just did.
Yeah.
You made a game, you played it, right? You decided to add a new player.
Yeah.
And then you gave the model, hey,
Yeah.
in scenarios like this, add a new player.
So
right?
now it understands. Now
Yes.
it understands the game rules. Okay, yes, I have the ability to add new player,
Mhm.
and but I will change the game altogether
Sure.
tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
So
But that's where it keeps climbing.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you feel like that's something you're willing and capable of doing.
I don't know how we do that, right? So maybe that's what's still happening.
Of course. Thank you.
No, it's a great question.
Yeah.
I got it. That's interesting.
We'll have to go back and then,
Yeah, and I don't mean to keep us up, I was just.
No, not at all. This, again, so I was at something earlier this week, and I gave had a small discussion with people, and someone said, you know what, that was thought-provoking, and I thought, that's really the goal. It's not about being right. It's not about pushing your ideas. It's really provoking thought. And that I hope we did today. And if we did achieve it, it's because all of you contributed to it. Multi-perspective discussions. They're heavy on Monday mornings when you just want to get stuff done, but you're on Friday afternoon, you're happy you had it. So,
It's not about, being a marker board where we are going through prompt and other engineering aspects. It's more about open conversation we all learn, we all approach. On your seat, you might find some postcards. You can feel free to take them. There's some pens here. Please feel free. And no, it's great. And we would love to keep in touch. We'll all get information about it.
yeah.
And that's
And the group is about this.
yeah.
There's no other motivation behind it except how quickly can we share each other's ideas so we can help each other navigate and identify surgically the opportunities we all have in front of us. While everyone's playing around with these other things, right? Telling them just build it on top of this skill I put in for code. Think about what it really takes, those of us who have gone through the pain and know those principles. That's what the whole game is about. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it.